Good morning. Thank you all so much for setting your alarms this morning and help us kick off another great year of Design SF. So without further ado, please help me welcome the maven of fashion, fabric, and residential design, Trina Turk. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Was fashion in there?
I mean, I think that fashion sort of came onto the radar when I learned how to sew and when I realized that there was a possibility for a career in that. I don't think I really understood what being a fashion designer was as a career, but I pretty much decided that that's what I was going to do.
So you're both a businesswoman and a highly creative individual. Do you identify with one side more than the other, and how do you balance the two?
The question of balance, I think, is something that comes up a lot, and there is no balance in my life. Basically, I think that everything I do somehow influences what our products are. So, you know, my hobbies and my interests and what I do when I'm not at the office are all things that somehow relate to our business.
So of all the millions of women who wear your clothes today and those who bring your designs into their home, what 3 personality traits would you assume they all have in common?
Well, I don't think they're wallflowers.
Yeah.
They're not wallflowers. I think that there's a practicality to what we do, that you know, you can wear the clothes and you can function in your life without having to fuss with whatever you're wearing.
How did you make the leap from a sort of small one-woman show to this international brand?
Well, it was very sort of slow and steady. You know, I started in our house, which I don't really recommend working from home. There were days when I would never change. You know, my husband, who was a fashion stylist at the time, you know, he'd leave at like 6:30 a.m. and he'd come back at 7, and I'd still be in my pajamas, essentially.
Have there been any sacrifices that have come with the success and the growth?
Well, I guess the thing is that I think that at the very beginning, what I was doing was very pure, because I was designing everything myself, I was drawing everything myself, I was making every single decision myself. And you know, of course, as you grow, you can't do that anymore. Yeah. As a designer, you kind of want to move on to the next thing, but sometimes the retailers don't really want to let you do that. And as much as they sort of say that they want newness, they think they want newness, but they always kind of want to go back to what did well last year.
How important do you feel brand is to the designer?
I mean, I think that the brand is the most important thing. In the contemporary marketplace, which is where, you know, the category that we're in, you know, there's a million brands. And I think that having a strong identity is key, because otherwise it's just a sea of merchandise and it is sort of meaningless.
When it comes to patterns, as you said, you're known for big and bold. Do you feel like that's a trend that has a shelf life? And if so, is it approaching, and how do you plan to adapt?
I don't think big and bold has a shelf life, because if you think back to sort of William Morris, Art Nouveau, you know, wallpaper, for example. These were like big, flowery designs. I don't really think that the idea of large pattern is anything new, and so therefore I don't really think it has a shelf life.
Yeah.
In terms of like what I see coming, I mean, I guess the main thing I see coming is just this idea that interiors are more changeable, the same way that fashion is changeable. And this idea that you decorate your house and you leave it that way for 30 years is over.
In your opinion, why does design matter?
Well, I mean, design matters if it matters to you, I suppose. I just, you know, in a perfect world, would only live in a perfectly designed environment. But obviously, you don't have control over everything. And I just think that it makes life more interesting and more pleasant.
With globalization, internet, everything is accessible. It sort of muted the distinctions between different geographic locations. But despite that, what do you think still sets California apart?
The kind of new aginess that still is associated with California. And also the fact that, you know, in terms of being progressive, we've always been progressive. So I think that those ideas are just, they've stuck.
Yeah.
And even though maybe that exotic ideal of California is not as exotic as it used to be, all those other things are still associated with California.